welcome. We're here at Bracolo Garden Center. I'm Jessica Damasio. I'm the general manager, and I am here with Lori Bracolo. And we are going to talk a little bit about prepping your gardens and maybe some of the better tools that we can use to do that. And I see, Lori, you're holding a few things there. So what do you got?
Okay. So, since I've been farming, I've always been looking for easier ways to dig. And this is an area that's already had gardens in the past. So we have tilled it, we have added compost, and then we plant. But every single year, we just weeded this because weeds come up over, the winter through now. The next thing I'm going to be doing now is I want to make sure that we can dig in and turn it over. And notice it's not going that far. So I really have to do this every single year. Completely re-till, just dig and turn, just to get a good 6 to 8 inches loosened.
6 to 8 inches is what you really need for the roots, is that right?
6 to 8 inches is definitely what you need for any of your plants. So if you're doing a raised beds, they're usually about 18 inches, but it's the first 6 to 8 inches where the roots are really, really important. And then we still add amendments. So even though I've loosened the soil, I always want to add compost. And by the way, bumper crop is the absolute best.
This is the greatest soil builder there is.
They have another one similar called potting soil, bumper crop Gardener's Gold, which is great because it's a little more drainage in it for pots. But for your gardens, every tree, shrub, perennial, and annual in the soil should be mixed. And it's not a lot. So I took 1 scoop.
Just a shovelful.
Yeah. And now I'm going to show you how to plant properly. And I also want to show you sometimes just to get the weeds out. This is the type of thing that we do initially, just to get the roots loosened, to get rid of those nasty competing weeds, which is what I hate about a vegetable garden, because I feel like I'm compelled to constantly have to get out there and weed. So we're going to talk about techniques there as well. And my absolute favorite plant tool called Hoe-Matic. It's a Maddox and kind of hoe. You can see people with the big, huge pick type axes.
Yep.
This is the same.
You'll never catch a gardener without that tool.
Leverage.
Yes.
All right. And that's why I use the short handle shovel too. So I'm looking for more leverage for my body strength. Some of the guys, they can go with the long handled shovels. That just isn't going to work for me. So I want to make sure that I've got a little bit of mixed in here and that we don't plant too deep. So I'm going to show you how I know that that is too deep. Because look, level, this root, the stem, is down below. Something that is a common mistake is planting way too deep. I want it right at the soil level, and I want to be seeing the actual root flare, the top of the crown of the roots. Okay, and that's that.
And this the same is for anything that you're planting, right, Lori?
Yeah.
Where if it's a tree, a shrub, you want to see that root flare be completely level with the ground that you're putting it in.
And looking at our spot right here, you can see I have shade. I'm in the shade right now, but in about an hour, and it's going to be what, a little after noon or 1?
Yeah.
This is all going to be hot, sunny afternoon sun. So I have something for plants to crawl on, and that means I can put a cucumber over here. I can put different kinds of beans and train it to go up through the trellis, and that's what we do every year. Then we planted a few perennials that come back every year. We've already harvested some, but check out this asparagus, because it's not going to be here very long. It's going home with me.
And that asparagus isn't just, delicious to eat. I think it adds some really, really pretty interest to your garden. And if you actually let it stay in bloom, it is a gorgeous flower. But I'll usually eat it ahead of time.
And so This plant actually takes several years for the roots to develop and start to get enough to harvest. So that, thinking about how you're going to place your plants, the one I just put here, always leave my marker, is going to be a fairly tall and cherry tomato plant. So that means it's going to need support later in the season. This one, heirloom tomatoes, it's also going to be fairly tall, 15, 20, sometimes they can get even bigger depending if your soil's really good. And as soon as they get those heavy tomatoes, they start to fall over. And then the slugs get them. So you've got to stand them up off the ground.
You always want to definitely give your tomatoes support, and it's really best once they start to grow to prune off those lower leaves so nothing's touching the ground. You don't want any of your leaves touching the ground, and so that's another reason why it's important to make sure that you have some sort of support system, whether it be the tomato cages or a trellis with strings on it. And I've seen a lot of people do like budget ways of keeping their tomatoes up. And there's lots of different methods.
So I look at layering it just like you would any other garden, where the taller things are in the back, really tall viney things in the far back, and then as you get closer to the front part of the garden, you can use things that might crawl. You could use like cucumbers and let them crawl, and that actually helps. Again, you're gonna have to prop up the actual cucumber, but the plant itself gets so thick that it helps to keep the weeds out. So think about it in that terms. And also, almost all of the herbs are perennial, and they can come back every year. So this is sage, and the herbs like it hotter, so they can go out on the edge and really handle the heat, where the other plants really need to have a lot more moisture. So that will help the plant, the herbs in that, stop the other plants from having the soil dry up too much. All right, it's kind of a protectant, almost like a buffer of low-growing drought types of plants, perennials. Plus, if you let them go to flower, they help bring in the pollinators. All right, so this is our little kitchen garden. Here's some chives that came up again from last year. Garlic, chives, the asparagus, fennel will self-sow. Love this plant, and that will self-sow. We've got a lot of chives over in here. So we try to keep the things that are going to spread into one section, and then we're replanting new stuff in another area. So just kind of planning it out every single year.
How much space do you think that there should be between two tomatoes?
Good point, because I know that this is going to get quite large.
Right.
So we're going to need a couple feet.
Okay.
Definitely a good couple feet between anything that's shrubby. And then as far as pests go, who's going to get to my vegetables before I do is really frustrating sometimes. The woodchucks, I have no comment on the woodchucks. But I can tell you, like the deer and even some of the bunnies, they do not like the black netting. So if it's a real serious problem, you can put black netting over the plants, and it will really discourage them from getting in there, and the plants can grow up through it. What else can we do? There's always, the sprays like liquid fence.
Can I ask a question, Lori?
Yeah.
When I was a kid growing up, we had a vegetable garden, and it was amazing. My dad was great. They always had a border of marigolds around the entire vegetable garden, and he said it was for a reason. Now, what reason would that be?
It is the smell, and it does help keep things like the deer away.
Okay.
And also, when I was talking about herbs, they have a strong smell too. So thinking about that as a border, and yes, add in some marigolds and nasturtiums and zinnias, because all of those petals can actually be eaten and sprinkled in. So there's a lot of flowers that we can eat, and then create a lot more fun texture and interest. And I don't suggest spraying anything. We're not into spraying for pests. If I see something, I'm gonna grab that caterpillar and just take them off and stomp on them. and like finding ways to keep the deer away. Otherwise, you can do fencing. If you lived in Irondequoit, you're going to need an 8-foot fence all the way around. There's no doubt about it. But
And
then
if you do see, what about you know, if you're dealing with other pests like aphids, but you also see that you've got some ladybugs hanging around, that's a sign that you definitely do not need to spray anything, right?
Right, and also the aphids are not eating your actual the fruit.
Okay.
They don't eat the herbs. First of all, they don't like them. They like soft tissue, and you're not eating. So what if a few bugs eat some leaves? As long as they're not ruining your harvest.
That's a good point. So do they even really need to be gone?
Right.
Yeah. In many cases, no. They're not damaging what you are getting out of the plant.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense.
So hopefully this gives you some good tips and that you're not afraid to try some small spots